In this podcast episode, I'm going to be accountable and give you my final lessons learned after finishing Jimmy O Yang's book on how to be American. It's essentially his memoir about immigrating to the US of A and then becoming a successful actor. You may have seen him on shows like Silicon Valley and the Netflix original show, I believe it's called Love Hard or Love Actually or something like that. It's not Love Actually. I think it's Love Hard, but it was number one in the US of A on Netflix back around Christmas because it's like a rom-com that's Christmas themed. Yeah, it's Love Hard. Now, uh, in my last podcast episode, I actually was talking about the book, but I was like, to be honest, I didn't finish it yet. I'm like 65% through, and now I finished it. I want to be accountable. I read it cover to cover, uh, and really just want to talk about some final lessons learned and emphasize some really important points from the book that may be helpful to you. So I think the first big one is just the fact that you should be grateful if you live in the US of A, but many Americans do not realize this and they take it for granted. Why do they do this? Because they've only lived here. They haven't lived anywhere else, so they don't have anything to compare it to. But from hearing Jimmy's story, as well as all the other immigrants that I've met and talked to, uh, they have told me, and this is a great reminder, they have reminded me how grateful I am. I was talking to someone else the other day, and like to the point of the book, she was from India, and she was like, "Oh, this place is so much better. I want to stay here forever, but I have green card, visa things that I'm trying to work out." And essentially, she was seeking to extend her time here, but it's very tough to do. And being from India, she knows how much worse it is there. So she was remarking about how a lot of Americans take it for granted, and it was a good reminder to myself to be grateful. Now, what are the specifics of why we should take it for uh, why we should be grateful? Well, she mentioned a couple things, like if you call 911 in India, or the equivalent of 911, you can't guarantee or bet that the ambulance will arrive at all, let alone on time. Oftentimes they arrive very late, and since there's like a billion people there and a bad infrastructure, the people are already dead by the time the ambulance arrives. So that's one thing, but then I think there's other things like retirement, like you work or you die. Like there is no social security or fund ready for people to protect you on a healthcare basis or a standard of living basis after you come of a certain age. So I found those things very interesting. Now, of course, in the U.S., there's certain personal finance things that you need to consider, like the fact that Social Security is changing and the amount that it supplements may not be enough on its own, and so you should be investing your money into a Roth IRA or 401k to grow it so you can actually supplement your Social Security because it may not be enough on its own given the sheer size of people and whatnot, but that's not neither here nor there. I don't want to get into the personal finance thing too much, but from what I've learned so far from talking to Social Security professionals as well as uh, tons of personal finance people, I think the U.S. isn't perfect by any means. You should probably start investing in a Roth IRA and growing that through an index fund so that you have something to supplement your Social Security. I think despite the growing retirement population, from what I heard, the U.S. government has plans to kind of prepare for this so that everyone still gets a reasonable amount, but you should really start to supplement it. Anyhow, that aside, what else did I learn from Jimmy? I think I also learned that uh, you will not just automatically skyrocket to fame and success just because you're an actor. So I found that very humbling, and it was something really down to earth about it. His whole book was really down to earth, and uh, he was just saying how like even though he became a series regular on Silicon Valley and all this stuff, and he wasn't like some super famous person doing well romantically or like living the high baller lifestyle. No, it just meant that instead of sharing a really dingy, crappy Craigslist apartment room with like two of his best comedy friends, he now had his own one bedroom apartment, but he still had to go on Tinder to find dates. He was still just like a regular guy, kind of having regular results in life. So I found that very interesting, and he would always inject some witty humor and wit into that whole situation, just kind of saying how he still had a lot of trouble with Tinder, and uh, you know, even the people who recognized him, like there weren't many, and if they did, they would call him a catfish, and he would just be like, why would anyone catfish me? I'm like the worst person to catfish. You probably want to catfish Brad Pitt or something. But yeah, it was just very humorous and loving to see like his struggles, because I think the whole book was really about his struggles, his failures, and adding a lot of vulnerable, witty humor to them. It was a lot of kind of self-deprecation, and I found that very entertaining and heartwarming, because for me at least, I in the past usually took it in a very negative, a resentful way when my life wasn't going well. But it seems like for him, he always not only added humor, but I think the underlying tone was he was pursuing his dreams. So, I kind of concluded the book by saying, yeah, like I lived in a $300 really dingy apartment room that I had to share, uh, and there's some sketchy things that happened in that place. Uh, but I was living my dream. I was pursuing what I wanted, which was acting and comedy. And even though I was under the poverty line, I was still enjoying life and pursuing my dream rather than my parents' dream of me becoming a uh, finance guy, or making money at a boring desk job. And that's exactly what he did. Like he got a job offer from a stock retirement company, and his dad was super proud and happy, but he actually turned that down and chose to live this poverty-stricken life trying to become an actor. And I think he concluded by saying that although it was so dingy, he enjoyed it so much, and he was chasing his dreams rather than living out something he dreaded and hated, that it was worth it. And the best times of his life were living uh, that broke and poor. But he does like it now that he lives in a better apartment. So I found that very inspiring in a way, and also very courageous. Like I chose not to do that. I couldn't do that. Like I after college I was like, I could jump out and be an actor, but I don't want to live on the streets. I want to at least get a stable job, and then maybe on the side I could do acting. But for him to take that plunge was crazy. Now, of course, he was in a different situation where I think, he had less job prospects than me, and I didn't really have any good job prospects, and I did not live anywhere near California. So I just found it admirable and courageous, and it made me wonder, like, what if, am I being not courageous enough? Um, yes and no. I feel like I felt like there's a better way of setting things up in a more stable, smart manner. Like I did not want to be the waiter in the daytime and then trying to become an actor on the side. That would have just been too extreme. I would have rather like had a solid, stable, you know, tech job during the day and then tried acting on the side. So I guess I took a different path than him, but I mean, he really went all out. Now, with his success, he's on Crazy Rich Asians. He's going to be on Crazy Rich Asians 2. He was on Love Hard. It is very inspiring. And then if you check out his Instagram, at least for the last few months, I think even his romantic life has taken a great turn. He seems to have a stable girlfriend for a while, and she's this beautiful blonde woman. And so things have taken a turn for the better. And I think it's also inspiring, like, because it's not like, after hearing his story, it's not like, oh, well, he just became rich and famous and successful, and that's why everything has succeeded, and this girl only likes him for his fame. I would disagree with that. Uh, Read the book, actually get the context. I mean, this guy, I think he's still pretty darn average. Probably makes an average decent income, but nothing like to the moon. And so I think it was inspiring or relatable. I think he said something in an interview with his co-star Nina Dobrev that really spoke to me, promoting Love Hard, and it was basically that I used to think that no one would ever really like me as I am because I'm this kind of nerdy, skinny, like Asian kid, but he felt like the theme of the movie and what he believed himself was that there are people who will like you for who you are right now. You don't have to be some hotshot superstar. There are awesome people who will like you as you are now. And Jimmy was emphasizing in the interview how at the time he wouldn't have believed that back in the day, but he found it to be true. So I found it very inspirational for me, at least, because to this day, that's still something uh, that I struggle with, like that whole like self-esteem and you know uh, inspirational pursuit. So that's kind of the summary of the book in a nutshell, and very entertaining read. It's also one of those memoirs that probably only covers a portion of his life because I think he's still very young and there's a lot more he's done since publishing the book and will do. So I found that interesting how people might put out memoirs that early on in their life, but it's also like I think it was worth putting out because there's a lot of really relatable immigrant stories. Oh yeah, the last big thing I wanted to say is that he concluded the book by saying how he has a completely different perspective when Hollywood casts Asians in stereotypical Asian immigrant roles. He never seemed to relate to the people, Asian actors who would refuse uh, to audition for stereotypical roles that put Asians in negative perspective. So, I mean, his character in Jin Yang is one of many examples where he has this thick accent. He's not depicted as super attractive and he's kind of annoying. And for Jimmy, he feels like he's proud to play these characters because that's who he was. That's how he was. It represents his immigrant story and his life. And so he never related to those. Now, for me, as someone who runs a podcast and blog and has a lot of context to the Asian American situation, because a lot of my audience are, I understand both perspectives, but I understood the Asian American one uh, with people who refused to take those roles a lot more, and Jimmy helped see the other perspective. So, I think Ken Jeong's another example. He played a very kind of uh, not very desirable, fresh off the boat Asian character in the Hangover series, and I think in my mind, in many other minds, I think Asian men in particular do like, why would you take on roles like that? You're propelling this picture of Asians as not seen as attractive in America, and that's already a big cause of why uh, many women in America don't see Asians as attractive, and you're just propelling that on. And I think even in the last few years, there's been a lot of Asian male actors coming out saying that they used to take those roles, but then when they saw how Hollywood or the directors and others were making fun or laughing at the expense of the Asian culture, they felt angry or guilty and they refused to take those roles. I think there's a few other actors who have come out prominently on YouTube and other stuff who have said stuff like that. I think one of them was the guy who played Cowboy Bebop recently in the live action film. Let me look up his name. He's pretty well known. John Cho, very well known actor. Uh, but now I see the different perspectives. With Jimmy, he's very proud to play that immigrant role because that's who he was. And I think when you read the memoir in detail, he lays out more explanation as to why. For example, he also played a lot of very sentimental, uh, inspirational characters. In fact, one of his proudest moments was uh, playing the Asian actor who was abducted and kidnapped. Sorry, he played the Asian immigrant who was abducted and kidnapped by the terrorists during the Boston bombings. And there's whole passages in the book about how Jimmy was so inspired and, about the actual person and how he conducted himself in the situation and how he felt and acted uh, during those moments when he didn't feel like he would see his family again because he felt he was going to die being a hostage, and how he got away and escaped. And I think he spent like 48 hours with the kidnapper, and how his final call to the police helped the police find this terrorist, and how terrible the terrorist was and all this stuff. And you could really tell that Jimmy studied and met with the real person, and really admired and was inspired by this person, but also, they conversed in Chinese and they connected immediately. And I think he explained it so well in the book that I really understood, wow, you know, not all Asian immigrant roles are bad. And like, yeah, I can see why he's proud to play these characters. Yeah, they may not have desirable accents, but in Jimmy's eyes, he's really trying to, I think to quote his words, he's trying to make that fobby Asian immigrant into as sexy as Brad Pitt. I think that's how he's viewing things. I think his intentions are the same of kind of redepicting Asian men in Hollywood in a more attractable light, but he's doing it in the way he can, which is through taking those immigrant characters, representing them well because they are really what he was a few years ago, and really showing them in attractive ways as best he can. So I found that very interesting, and it also taught me a lot more about how much work acting is. Like he did all these acting exercises, would practice like all day with certain accents, and also get a sense for the character and do all this background research to really understand a character or just nail a certain dialect of accent. So it gave me a lot more respect for the skill set of acting, and I think it's not just learning the character, but how that character sees the world, perceives the world, and how others treat him. Like Jimmy literally, uh, the actor that the immigrant he was portraying in the Boston bombing film was came from a Sichuan dialect of Chinese, and so he had to learn that dialect. He practiced like hours every day, and then he would go out to the post office and stuff, speak that dialect, and he would also absorb how others reacted to him. And he learned a lot about how people treated certain individuals, and it was very interesting because like that apparently that dialect and the accent it gave was very different from Mandarin, but also very much a hassle for anyone who's tried to speak with him in English that were Americans, because they treated him worse because of the accent, and they didn't really acknowledge him because it was frustrating to understand him. And so he paid attention to that and brought it into his acting performance. So I found the whole thing interesting, and I think throughout the book he definitely struggled with a lot of classic immigrant themes, seeing and I think he concluded with a more positive, uh, confident stance on who he was. Because I think there's definitely a struggle with like, am I American? Am I Chinese? I'm not seen as American or Chinese by these groups, so what am I? And ultimately he concluded with saying that, I am fully American and I am fully Chinese. And he had a few stories towards the end about how he was acknowledged by certain people and whatnot, uh, and he felt like now he was American, and that helped him kind of get that confidence, which I found heartwarming. Um, and then there's other things like not having visited Hong Kong until like 2 or 3 years ago, since he immigrated here while he was 13, and then wondering if the city had changed or it wasn't as great as he thought. But then going there and seeing that it was just as great as he remembered, and having all those memories come back, and reconnecting with his like long lost friends through Facebook, um, it was just very inspiring. And I think, yeah, I just want to conclude by saying that the book was down to earth, relatable, and very honest and witty. So yeah, I would love for him to write a sequel because I feel like it would be pretty darn entertaining. And it seems like his life is on the up and up, and he's been able to find his groove. I think he's someone who maybe even more so than me. I think I'm decent at it, but he seems to be fully aware of who he is, what he has to offer, and what he doesn't, and fully proud of that. And uh, he presents that to the world. He's that skinny Asian funny guy, and he knows humor is his strong suit, but looks are not. And it seems like he's more in tune with like, hey, this is just who I am. Take it or leave it. And I think it's kind of working, and that's an inspiration. He has this beautiful girlfriend, uh, and he's doing better and better in the world of film and acting, and life's on the come up. I think in that Love Hard interview I watched, he said he was actually taking his parents to Fiji because they were filming in Fiji. And at the end of the book, he also listed all the countries he was in while he wrote the book. And it was a long list. It was like 15 different countries, like Paris, Australia, South America. And I was like, wow. And he was just saying how thankful he was that acting had given him all these opportunities. So it really is quite a incredible story in a way, but also a humbling story. There's a lot of very tough, relatable Asian immigrant times that were not fun, that were viewed in certain ways as failure. And I'm not saying this guy should be a role model. He has all the answers, because it's not a book like that. It's more of an entertaining book and a vulnerable book. Like, there's clearly a lot of things that he screwed up on and did wrong, but you can still learn from that. Like in my last episode, I talked about the story where he did all this work to become a strip club DJ because he thought that would change everything and change his dating life, because apparently his comedian friend hooked up with like 60 girls as a strip club DJ. And then he did all that, didn't get laid once, and found out like, certain girls that he thought he had a chance with or were innocent were actually not that innocent and were hooking up with other guys. Uh, so yeah, I think it's a very interesting story to say the least. And I mean, I think we should get Jimmy on this podcast. I think that's a good goal. I've been trying to reach out to him, haven't heard from him, but yeah, feel free to tag him and see if you can get him. We can get him on to ask some more questions. But if not, not a big deal. I think the real thing is, if you're out there, if anyone's listening to the podcast, let me know. I feel like, at least in the last few months, I've been just talking to like a dead wall here. Like, I haven't gotten any comments or responses regarded to the podcast. At least I've been getting comments on other things around other parts of my content I'm putting out. But I really want to get your feedback. Is this podcast format style working? Is it helpful? I'm seeing this numbers, so people are listening, but like, I'd love to get your actual thoughts, speak to you one-on-one. Reach out to me on my blog, on Instagram. There's a contact form on my blog, and I just want to get your thoughts about if these podcasts are helpful or entertaining or whatnot. But what's the takeaway here? Should you be like Jimmy Yang? I think not entirely. You should be fully yourself, but you may be able to find the book entertaining or at least inspiring, to say the least, and you could learn a thing or two about being your full self, about accepting yourself as and acknowledging yourself as American or as Asian or both, or maybe just pursuing your dreams and pursuing what you want out of life. But yeah, here's the Jimmy Yang. I'm gonna raise my imaginary martini glass or whatnot and just say, to a guy who's somehow hacked life and seems to be living pretty darn good life on all fronts. Thanks for listening. See you later.